You ever have one of those days where it just seems like everything's going wrong? Like it's this big, depressing dumpster fire of misery all wrapped in despair, something kind of like this?
I'm sorry. No! Why? Why? Do you really hate me that bad?
So the question I have, like many of you might have, is what makes someone do this? Like what would bring them to this point in their life where they lose like basically their physical capabilities and seemingly their mental capabilities? And how does the answer to that question have to do with your financial future? We're gonna discuss that today on Mindset. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome to Mindset. I want to thank everybody for joining us today, but I also want to thank all of our Make Your Money Matter subscribers and viewers. Quick aside here, we've taken a little bit of a break. You probably noticed that. We wanted to rebrand and rechange the way we're doing our show. A lot of the comments, even the discussions we've been having over the past couple years on our channel has largely been around money. That's not changing. But what we want to discuss a little bit more is the thought process we have behind money, like how we think about it, how it affects us, and really, ultimately, why we do what we do with our money. So the show, we rebranded it, we called it Mindset. I felt it was very apropos, as they say, for what I talk about as a financial advisor of nearly 20 years with all of our clients. Now, as many of you know, if I want to reintroduce myself, and for our new viewers and subscribers, my name is Brad Barrett. I'm a managing director and partner at One Capital Management. We are a registered investment advisor. We manage just over $7 billion for clients around this great nation of ours and actually in Canada and around North America. I'm very excited to be here with you every week. Our show is going to be every Wednesday here, Mindset with Brad Barrett, and we're going to discuss a whole bunch of stuff. And this is not going to change the subject matter, the content. It's not really going to change a whole lot from our previous show, but we're going to go full steam ahead. And with that, I want to actually also introduce you to some new members of our show. Producer Jared, welcome on.
How's it going, everyone?
So, you're getting used to our subscribership. We've been involved with these wonderful people for a couple years, and hopefully we get some more.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're excited for today. The beauty of this show and almost the rebrand is a way is kind of to have more of a discussion format. This is largely what Jared and I were kind of talking about with regards to how I meet with clients every week, and I've been doing it for nearly 20 years at this point. It's more open, more authentic, more vulnerable, less scripted. And so the idea with this is to talk about really pertinent matters. Now, for those of you who watched the open to our show today, we're going to talk about something that I think is perfect to start the new year off. And that is ultimately how presidential elections may or may not affect the stock market. And I think it's important to think about that because, look, here in a couple weeks, you're going to see an inauguration of a new/old president, however you want to look at that one. That one's unique, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. And we were talking pre-show, Jared, like this is, as an advisor, this is my 5th election cycle as an advisor. And we've gone through—
It's a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time, but I didn't, when I said that, it didn't sound as long. And then I started thinking about it, shoot, that's like, 20 years. And it's interesting because I think we think that if there's a certain president or not, or a certain party involved, that there are going to be better markets. And we're going to talk about that today and bring some, I think, relativity to that a little bit. And I think the ultimate part of this whole thing is to kind of go through history a little bit to talk about the future. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
So at its core, this show is really about how your psychology and your mindset shapes you, especially when it comes to your money. And not just shapes you, but how it guides you and how it affects you. And as you saw at the top of the show, we shared a video of someone kind of freaking out a little bit, and she's not alone. Take a look at this.
We have literally lost the plot. We have lost the plot.
What the f*** is going on?
I've been crying in my room for the past hour. For the past hour.
I can't do this anymore. I'm literally sick. I'm literally sick to my stomach. I am so frustrated.
My mom is freaking out. Kamala.
It's not okay. This is not okay. This simply will not do. And this is not okay. And I'm not good with this.
Oh, the joys of presidential elections. Jared, it's quite interesting if you think about it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's kind of like we're around the same time period as Super Bowl every 4 years. So it's like the Super Bowl, but without all the commercials and fanfare, you get just despair and freaking out.
Yeah, both have extreme pomp and circumstance.
Look, again, I just want to share with everybody, and we'll always talk about this on our show. Like, this isn't about, what stock to buy or what not to buy or anything like that, because ultimately I think, as I always share, for anyone who's been around me and watching me, it's one of those things where it's time in versus timing. And that's what I really want to focus on today, because in these stressful election days, look, we just came off the eve of an election cycle, and it wasn't exactly a great second half of 2024. I mean, we had all this bantering going on, this back and forth. I mean, look, and I'm not a political person, and I just candidly, I'm really not. I think everyone thinks as a financial advisor you should be, and I would argue that a little bit, because I think we have to be somewhat down the middle. Because I serve clients that are on both sides. I serve clients that are on different sides, and I think that's important because the money is neutral. Like the 1 Timothy 6:10 notion of people think, money's the root of all evil. It's a big misnomer here. It's the love of money, and money itself is neither good nor bad. And so when you think about money and how it relates, it's just kind of the sandbox to which we're all going to play in. That's ultimately what the presidential election is going to show us.
Yeah.
And I think, when we talk about election cycles and fear and uncertainty, which is basically what we're talking about here, the one certain thing about this world we live in is uncertainty. And, there's a saying that goes, as goes the president, so goes the market. Now, I've always had an issue with that, quite honestly, and I think some of the stats, we show that a little bit, because, this phrase does capture, how stock markets tend to be volatile leading up to it. But you ever notice Jerry, you ever notice when a president comes in, they talk about their first 100 days?
Yeah.
Like it's a big thing.
Yeah.
If you think about that, and this might be subjective, I'm sure you guys will leave some comments on this one, but like the reality is, if you think about it, those first 100 days are actually the settling out period for consumers, right? It's kind of like, if you look at stats, it's what the stock market's doing in the first 90 days, which is essentially the 100-day platform. Now they're talking about their policies and the reform and all this stuff, but it's also a unique time period for markets.
But that to me, that sets the tone of what we're going to be looking at for 4 years. So, people like me are watching that, pretty closely to see like, okay, what's my next 4 years going to be like?
I agree. And when it comes to fluctuations, let's kind of lead into it here. Is that actually true? But we're going to dig in and find out, really how presidential elections affect the stock market. So one of the things I want to go through here, and I think it's important we talked about this, is we got to go backwards to go forwards. So let's talk about some volatile stock market elections here, okay? Bush versus Gore, okay? Probably one of the more volatile elections, I think, in modern history. Now, quick aside here for a second. The S&P, just to be clear for a second, the broad market indicator, there's a stat here. It fell nearly 8% right around November of 2000 with the election.
Is that a lot? Is that a little? What's that kind of translate to?
8% could be big or small depending on the time period. So that's somewhat of a subjective. It's all about context, right? 8% is pretty significant, whether it's in a whole year. I would think someone on here would say that 8% drop in a whole year is pretty big. So an 8% drop in a matter of a couple months is probably substantially big, right? It shows there's a lot of volatility happening in a short time period. Now, why was 2000 such a thing? The election was November 7th on 2000. And as part of this, nationwide presidential election, Florida at the time, which was a swing state, had a major recount dispute that took center stage of this entire election.
Good grief. Look at that. 11. That means automatic recount.
Suspense is mounting in Florida tonight.
Probably at least 500 people outside, spirited demonstrators, both for Bush and Gore.
You remember that whole thing?
Absolutely. I remember that. It was honestly kind of terrifying because we just like, they wouldn't call it. We were like, come on, we need to know. We need to know.
And we hadn't seen that in modern history in a long time.
I had never seen it in my life.
Yeah. But ultimately, Bush ended up winning. It was a small count. I'm a numbers guy, right? I nerd out on this. This is crazy. The vote margin when Bush won was 537 votes out of 6 million that were cast that were being discussed. I did the math here. That is, I don't even know how to do this, 0.000089% margin.
Fun fact, I looked this up.
Yeah.
That's roughly the same percentage of people in the U.S. with 3 nipples.
What? Yeah. That's a real stat?
Yeah. That's
okay, there you go.
Yeah.
It's
very rare.
It's super.
Very small percentage.
It's very rare. Okay, so people. By the way, that's actually a wild stat.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you think about this, what was happening in 2000? This is apropos of what's kind of happening right now too. In 2000, we were also dealing with Y2K. So we had this election happening in November, and then we had Y2K happening basically 45 days later. Now, for those of you who don't remember Y2K, this was like when the computer systems were going to go haywire, right? They were using only the 2 digits, for those of us remember, of 99, like for 1999. But it could cause them to interpret these computers to be all messed up and everything like that. Now, in case you weren't alive or just don't remember and don't realize how bad this was that was going on, take a look at this.
There still exists a general state of either denial, complacency, or even apathy about both the reality and the potential effects of Y2K.
For convenience, all these computer programs, when it came to do dates, you only needed 2 numbers. Why use 4 numbers when you only need 2? And then they recognize what date is a computer going to think it is when we get to 2000.
One simple date change for man, one major screw-up for computer.
At the stroke of midnight, January 1st, 2000, elevators may stop. Heat may vanish. Credit cards and ATMs may cease to function. Airplanes and trains may come to a halt.
This is not one of the summer movies where you can close your eyes during the scary parts.
With nearly everything in our economy run by computers, the prospect of a digital meltdown is too huge to contemplate.
I've got a revolver right now, but I wanted something more.
That was a Dragon's Breath shell. It can shoot a 4,000-degree flame 300 feet. It's also the most popular ammunition among Y2K customers at KGS Guns and Ammo.
I remember vividly that whole thing. Like, I was basically being told like everything I knew was going to end, and there was all these predictions and this, that, and the other. By the way, we got through Y2K.
The world did not end.
The world did not end. Fun fact, we're all here today.
Yeah.
Just so we know it didn't end. So again, you had all this going on in the backdrop of all this. And as I mentioned, it caused some volatility. Let's look at some graphs to kind of illustrate some of these points here for a second. So as we talked about stock markets and how they've reacted and during past elections, and we're going to kick it off right away with 2000. We just spoke about it. This is a resource used by Yahoo Finance. And again, this is over 10 days following a US presidential election. I want to be very careful and stress here that as an advisor, I talk to clients a lot about being careful of, looking too myopically and too short term. Okay, you want to think about time in versus timing and long-term time horizon, but it serves a purpose to give you a picture, okay? So first 10 days of Bush's presidential election, down almost 6% on the S&P, broad market indicator, okay? His re-election, you got up 4%, but I want to talk about, take a look at this one. Down almost 15%. Now, look at this year. You have to understand something for a second. We're talking about presidential elections and what they might do for stock markets, but remember the backdrop to which an election might be in. We had a great financial crisis in 2008. I was in the business in 08. Let me tell you about putting hair on your chest. This is a big deal, okay? But this is the first 10 days after an election there. Then you got Obama's re-election. Wasn't too much better in 2012. We were still coming out of some things. We talked about 2016 here. It was positive for the year, but it was a lot of volatility going on in 16 ahead of it. Again, as I mentioned before, you got Brexit from the year prior. And I want to focus on something else here for a second, because going out past 10 days, this is the S&P 500 day after election day, week after election day, but I want to go through election through year end. I want to focus on this column right there. Take a look at this. 2000, George Bush. Remember, the first 10 days, it was down almost 6%. Throughout the year, it stayed down. We had a bad year. Now, remember, we were going into 2000 and then into 2001, and what happened in 01? The tech crisis, the tech bubble. So you got to remember, this was also on the tail end of a year end of him being elected. Now, you go into another one, 08 we talked about. Again, same thing. We're talking about a financial crisis as of the year end. It's not exactly a great year you got going on there. You go into 16, again, the Trump versus Hillary Clinton election, you got 4.6% going on. The idea here in 2024, and this one was really good because this was a study done by Bloomberg, right? The Trump-Harris election, we have this big question mark. But so far, after the election, it's up somewhat. Now, right afterwards, we had Powell come out. This was in basically early December of last year. We had Powell come out, lower interest rates, but then talk about how he's going to not have as many reductions next year. Had a market disruption, had a really big day there on December 18th, I think it was. And so it's important to take a look at long-term perspectives as we think about these kind of things. Now, real quickly, before we go into 2025, I want to talk about the US stocks in presidential election years. We're sitting here in January 25, 2024. This is a study done, and I really love the study because it was Morningstar who did the study, from January 1st of 1926. This was as of the end of the previous year of December 31st, 23. You can kind of see the first 2 quarters of an election year is kind of sluggish, which is what this is saying. Then you kind of got this ramp up. And we kind of saw that last year play out pretty well, don't you think? So we think about this and how we want to react to some things. And I think when we talk about presidential election years, it's really important to keep the long-term focus. There's a saying I say all the time. You might have heard this before. It's not the water that around a boat that sinks the ship, it's the water that gets in. The noise you're gonna have, the people you're watching, the things you're reading, those all factor into your money and how it's useful for you. Again, this is the mindset, the psychology of how we get into some things. All right, I wanna show you one more graph here for a second just for fun. So this is the growth of $1 in the S&P 500. Now again, this study was done by S&P data of Dow Jones Industrial Indices. It's a good one to look at, and it goes all the way back to 1926. You can see here from a Republican versus Democrat. As I stated before, I want to be very clear about something. This is not a political show in particular. This is not right or left or anything like that. This is looking down the middle in terms of how your money is affected by whoever's in presidency, whoever basically the United States is looking to vote in. Now, you can see the general trajectory of a market. This is probably not new to anybody who's been around the investing world. You kind of see this gradual thing. Now, if I were to zoom in on some of these time periods and you kind of talk about some things that are pretty important, right? You got oil issues going on in the 70s, 60s, and 70s, some things. Obviously, right here is a big one. This goes back almost 100 years, about 90 years ago. Great Depression, okay? You go over here inside of the Bush-Obama environment. This is more recent, 2008. It's an important one to think about. You got the right after the Bush election, as I alluded to as well. You have the tech crisis in 2001. And inside here, even Reagan, who everyone talks about, right, with this the great expansion and the great communicator and trickle-down economics, right? There was still periods inside of there that weren't hot. And even in the 90s, by the way, I mean, everyone talks about this, the 80s kind of led to the 90s boom, the tech boom and all that kind of stuff, which ultimately led to a bubble, but that's a different story, right? You still had little disruptions going on. The point of this whole graph, if you think about it, is exactly what I've been saying. Time in versus timing. And I think that's important for us to consider here. And look, end of the day, there are impacts from markets from elections and short-term and long-term. But ultimately, as you can see, I think how you look at your investments when it comes to elections has pretty much everything to do with the success of your money and ultimately how we think about it, as we all talk about. I mean, what do you think about the board there, Jared?
Love the board. Did a great job up there.
It's our new, for those of our subscribers and people watching here, it's our new toy. So we've been kind of nerding out a little bit on this thing.
That's our big boy toy.
It's a big boy toy.
Yeah.
We've got a little childish with it. It's kind of fun. We're like playing basically hangman up there sometimes. It's good stuff.
Yeah, now we got this. We can hang with the big boys at NBC and ESPN and all those guys.
I know. So we're trying to give you everything you see on main networks here, okay, friends? This is supposed to be fun. That's the new environment, I think, of mindset. But I'm gonna bring it to a close here for a second here because essentially how markets react to elections, and we're sitting here in January, we're having the inauguration here in basically 2 weeks, week and a half, whatever it is. There's a short-term impact I want to talk about, and a long-term impact. I think short-term, elections will always create uncertainty. I'm not saying some aha moment for anybody right now. And I think that'll ultimately lead to, volatility. And I think sector-specific swings, because yes, there are certain sectors of our economy that will react differently, just as any other situation. And I think you saw that from the short term on that, especially that 10-day one.
Yeah.
Right? That was a big one. That's super short term in my opinion, but you can see some of the volatility and then ultimately the end of the year results. They weren't exactly the same. Some were better, some were worse, but you can see there's backdrops behind it.
Now, when you talk short term, long term, like from an investor like me standpoint,
yeah.
Is that more for a professional? Like when a professional looks at 10 days, like for me, I'm like, I don't want to be monitoring every couple days.
Yeah.
Like, how does that relate to someone like me?
Short term and long term to me, this can be a subjective topic. It's a great question. In my world, anything south of 2 years, I would consider short term. Anything north of 2 years, I would look at as long term. And here's what I mean by that. If you think about just your own planning, right? You are typically putting some things aside for a year to two out, whether it's a bigger thing like a home purchase, as an example. I usually don't see longer term goals on that. It's kind of when I meet with somebody, they're talking about we have this on the backdrop of our mind, just got married, something like that. Or it's a trip or something like that. So those are short term. That's where money markets come in, cash on hand, those kind of things, right? When it comes to investing and the conversation about short term and long term, I think if you look past 18 to 24 months, I think that's when you start getting consideration of what I would say is long-term. And you'll see some of the results in that, because we were just showing, 10 days, year of, that's what we're talking about here. And that's what I want to say, kind of the conclusion to that point is, who cares what happens in 2025? I mean, I care, but like, you know what I mean? Like, unless you're 99 years old and you're going next year, it's somewhat irrelevant. Because again, long-term investing, in my opinion, will always win out. And so again, short-term, you're going to have some disruption, some volatility. You're going to see that. We've seen that pretty much every election year.
So I shouldn't go see a dip around an election and be like, call my finance guy. Oh, what's going on?
I think you should. You should call the guy.
Okay.
I mean, you should call. I mean, that's what he's there for. He or she is there for. Yes. But I would say I wouldn't overreact. End of the day, and this is a great mindset concept for everybody. End of the day, we are our worst enemy when it comes to investing. I want to pause on that and meditate on that for a second. Think about that, what that means to you. And I'm speaking generally, but I might be speaking to somebody here a little bit. You are your own worst enemy. And anytime we bring emotions in, it's a problem. Emotions are good, but when it comes to money, it might be problematic. I think as we think about that, you have to kind of work with that a little bit, okay? And you have to understand that, we can be our own worst enemy. We can get in our own way when it comes to that. And short-term in particular. So definitely make that call. That's what they're there for. And always seek counsel on that. That's the best advice I can give to anybody, But I think as you go out from short-term and go look at long-term, right? No matter what, election year or otherwise, market performance ultimately depends on economic fundamentals and really not just election outcomes, okay? Look, don't get me wrong. Policies that drive growth, innovation, consumer spending trends, those all lead to positive, corporate earnings and stock market growth. So yes, there is some factors at play, but ultimately it's economic fundamentals and all these black swan events we talk about, all these little things that can happen here and there. Those all add up to it. But I think everyone out there, having that long-term perspective matters. Ultimate takeaway here, in my opinion, is the market is smarter than elections. If you know that, you got something from today.
I got a lot from today.
Well, good.
Just so you know.
I like that.
Yeah.
If you did, then they did. All right. Well, again, you're getting a little peek into our environment. Like I told you, a little bit different of a setup here. But that to us, I think, concludes today's show about what to predict. And ultimately, I think, you probably clicked on this show and we're watching and saying, oh, what's he going to say? And what am I going to invest in? The reality is there's nothing specific I'm going to say other than to make sure you are proactive, not reactive when it comes to your investing. Always seek counsel. Everything we talked about today, by the way, do not act upon it. It's important to make sure you speak with your financial advisor or someone about your specific situation. If you want our help, you can always reach out to us. But I think it's ultimately important to remember that how we think about our money in a year like this is why we wanted to lead off with this first subject matter. It matters. The psychology of what we think, it matters. So friends, don't forget to like, subscribe to our show. We are very excited to do this new format. Producer Jared is going to be with me each and every episode, which is going to be some fun. And I think, more than anything, as always, lead with love and everything's going to be all right. Now, next week, though, we're going to have a great subject matter on
2025 predictions.
2020. Ooh, I like that.
Can't wait.
What am I going to say? I don't even know. 2025 predictions, friends. Enjoy yourselves this week. Have fun. Lead with love. Everything's going to be okay. And always remember, make it rain.